Every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country and indeed around the world. We've plenty coming up, including more reaction to the Chancellor's autumn statement, the impact on you, on businesses and on the prospects for the Conservative Party. We'll also be talking about how Ukraine handles success. Is it magnanimity or is it revenge? We're also speaking to a boxer about his mental health fight on this International Men's Day. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's other news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alastair. Good afternoon. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. FIFA's president has defended the decision to host the World Cup in Qatar and tried to show empathy during a news conference.
Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled.
Gianni Infantino's comments follow heavy criticism of Doha's treatment of migrant workers and LGBTQ people. He says he's compassionate towards all groups. He also accused the West of hypocrisy, telling European nations they have a lot to answer for.
I'm European. Actually, I am European. Not just I feel European. I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons.
Well, human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell told us the tournament should never have been given to Qatar and anyone connected with it risks damaging their reputation.
Well, I think it's really shameful that celebrities are allowing themselves to be bought by the Qatar billions in order to put a positive spin on what is a sexist, homophobic and racist dictatorship. I mean, how can David Beckham, Robbie Williams and all these other big stars who are performing in Qatar, how can they have a clean conscience when they know what this regime is doing to people? I think it's going to cause them huge damage.
Well, following months of bullying and harassment claims, the latest of which involves Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, there are calls to change the culture in Westminster. Chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, Caroline Noakes, says gay men are most at risk. She spoke exclusively to Gloria De Piero.
Young gay men, I sometimes think that they are the most vulnerable, that we give them a mechanism where they know that they're going to be protected.
Why do you say that young gay men may be the most vulnerable?
Because people don't talk about it. And I think that there is still a taboo around homosexuality. And there have been some cases where I can think of individuals who've harassed both male and female members of staff. And the female member of staff has had all of the sympathy, all of the column inches in the press. And there'll be this, and also when it comes to the young gay man.
Well, you can watch the full interview on GB News' latest show, Gloria Meets, where you'll find out who the person behind the politician is. That's every Sunday at 6 p.m. The search for a woman who was swept into a river has resumed in Aberdeenshire. It's believed she was trying to rescue a dog in the River Don at Monymusk when she got into difficulty. Heavy rain in the east of Scotland triggered several severe flood warnings, with the wet weather continuing to cause travel disruptions today. The United Nations is proposing the creation of a new fund to help developing countries cope with the cost of climate change. The money would be used to compensate 134 developing nations for their loss and damage experienced due to droughts, floods and wildfires. The text is yet to be approved by the COP27 summit in Egypt, which had to be extended due to the negotiations. The US says Russia is increasing missile strikes, hoping to exhaust Ukraine's air defence system. The claim by the Pentagon comes as a funeral is held for one and two men who were killed by a missile in Poland. It's thought the explosion was caused by a stray Ukrainian air defence missile that was trying to deter a Russian attack. Elon Musk has launched a Twitter poll asking users if he should bring back Donald Trump. The former president's account was suspended after last year's attack on the US Capitol. Twitter's new owner says he might reverse that ban. The poll, which you can see live on your screen now, is open for 24 hours and it's currently very close, with around 52.4% voting yes for Trump's return. It's also receiving around 1 million votes an hour. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. On Thursday, most Tory MPs were virtually silent during the autumn statement, except when the triple lock for state pensioners was confirmed. Social media, on the other hand, has been screaming. Not only the organised opposition and the usual suspects, but also ordinary Conservatives who seem to feel betrayed by what Jeremy Hunt announced. Many said they were leaving the party, some perhaps to join Reform or just walking away in despair. Quite a few even said, if we're going to have a socialist budget with high tax, more targeted spending for the NHS and education, but cuts in spending delayed into the future, well, we might as well have those who actually believe in it all in power, a Labour government. Wow. Well, all of the analysis suggests that the squeezed middle will hurt most. For the strivers putting in that extra shift, higher rates of income tax will come frighteningly sooner. The Office of Budget Responsibility says that average disposable incomes will fall by 7.1% over the next 2 years. Quotes, 2 years of shock for the middle classes, says the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies, as that tax take hits its highest level since 1948. Even the rather left-of-centre Resolution Foundation think tank says the autumn statement piled further pressure on the squeezed middle earners. Now, this morning, the Times newspaper says it'll cost middle Englanders around £20,000 a year. But the lowest paid in work will also be hit by basic income tax sooner, as the amount that all of us can earn before we pay any tax is frozen until 2027-28. Now, we're in a recession right now, and we're going to remain in it next year, with growth only just returning in 2024-25. Then there's a less generous energy support plan, possibility of higher council taxes without a referendum, higher mortgages and, of course, higher private sector rents. The biggest boost, perhaps the only boost, is for those on benefit, but they will now have to prove that they really can't work. But, as the Telegraph points out, that's the only reform in a costly and cumbersome benefit system that costs taxpayers billions. There's help too, as I said at the very top, for those who finished working, state pensioners. Like benefits, the state pensioners increased in April 23 by a little over 10%. But that freeze in the personal allowances could drag more of them into paying tax. The cuts in public spending won't kick in until the other side of the general election, which is likely in the autumn of 24 or possibly even the spring of 25. Higher taxes soon and lower public spending in the future are designed to put the public finances in order, bring down inflation and with it interest rates, and to reassure the money markets, who will still be getting over £100 billion a year in interest from the government for still very high borrowing levels. So, today, with those in the know, we look at the economics of it. Does it add up? What it means for businesses and for consumers like you and me. And, of course, the politics of it all. Email me your thoughts at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet at GBNews, tweet me directly or go on Facebook. And I will share the very best as we go along right up to 2 o'clock. So, to get the conversation going, I'm delighted to be joined here live in the studio by GB News political reporter Olivia Utley, who always has her finger upon the pulse and is talking to people about what they make of it all. I tweeted that this is a pretty grave situation and that many Conservatives are turning away from it right now. And Edwina Currie, who's an old chum, tweeted me back and said many Conservatives are thoroughly relieved that we have a sensible Prime Minister, a Chancellor who can add up, brackets though he's a bit downbeat, and policies to steady the pound and reduce inflation. So there. Does Edwina speak for the majority in the parliamentary party, do you think?
Well, I have spoken to Conservative MPs, mainly on the left of the party, as it were, who are quite relieved. In the short term, at least, they feel like there's been so much chaos in the past few months. They haven't really been able to talk about politics or policies at all. When any minister goes on television, for example, they've just been sat down and asked what the situation is with the Prime Minister and what's happening in Westminster, rather than being able to talk about their
even who is the Prime Minister just now.
Exactly. So there are Conservative MPs who feel like it's given them a little bit of breathing room with this budget, and who feel as though what Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak's plan seems to be is to sort of do the hard stuff quickly, get through this recession as quickly as possible, and hopefully come out the other side before the next election. And there are those Conservative MPs who think that's a viable plan and it could work and they should be given a chance. Yeah. On the other hand, there are plenty of Conservative MPs, and we saw Esther McVeigh on the show earlier talking about this, who feel as though there doesn't seem to be much of a reason to vote Conservative anymore. The Conservatives usually talk about the strivers, the entrepreneurs, the hard-working families, etc. But there was almost nothing in this budget for any of those people.
People's Channel, we like to hear what the people think, and I've read out what Edwina had to say. This is from John W., who says, I no longer recognise the party as Conservatives. Their policies are based on high borrowing, high taxation and a big state. They are socialists in all but name. I mean, that's a bit extreme in the conclusion, but the analysis is spot on, isn't it?
Well, it does feel there is a growth plan in place, which you could say is Conservative, but the growth plan all seems to be about top-down growth, as it were. So it's all about capital budgets, for example, aren't being cut, which was a threat. So the government is going ahead with all these sort of big infrastructure projects, HS2 being the most famous one, and lots of investment in skills and people, etc. But what there's very little of is the sort of bottom-up growth. There's very little. The government isn't sort of creating a great place for investors to invest or entrepreneurs to set up their businesses, or isn't even making the conditions easy for ordinary people to go to work, for example. It's not very easy for commuters to get to work at the moment, and obviously everyone's being squeezed by this cost of living crisis.
All right, let's park it there. Will you come back after 1 o'clock and have a further chat when you've hit the phones again? Oh, no, you're going down to the demonstration, aren't you? Well, if you do hear more, give me a bell and we'll still chat again. But for the time being, Olivia Utley, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. And as I say, you will be hearing from her again later on, but on a different subject and an equally important one. I'm delighted now to be joined by a very good old friend of mine, Jonathan Haslam. Jonathan's the former Chief Communications Secretary to Sir John Major, which is when I first met him, and we've known each other since. With that comms hat on, Jonathan, not a political question so much as a professional one, the marketing of this package has been very muted. Jeremy Hunt didn't even do the morning after round on television studios and the rest of it. Is that because it is a hard sell to hard-working Tories out in the country?
It's indeed, and thank you for having me on the show, by the way, Alastair. It's great to see you again. It is indeed a very tough sell, but we're in a tough position. And I think one of the two of the things that I would draw out of this is that in the first instance, the government has been placed in a pretty invidious position. First of all, we had COVID. That's a £400 billion bill. Then we've had the outrageous invasion of the Ukraine from Putin, which has done terrible things to the energy market. It's increased it by 8-fold. You've also had the unwinding of what is known as quantitative easing, which many people would say is printing money by the Bank of England to keep the wheels of industry going in difficult times. So you've got all of those factors going on. And I think the thing that struck me most recently about trying to communicate this is the Conservative Party has been talking to itself for the last 18 months over the dramas with Boris Johnson. And then we had that brief meteoric crash, courtesy of Liz Truss. And it's the Liz Truss problem, I think, which is really highlighted for people, incompetence in government, because what she did was to urge the markets, who panicked, to increase interest rates far higher than they would otherwise have done and far faster. So that will come off a little bit. But I think Jeremy Hunt played, he's playing a game of 5-card stud with 3 cards at the moment. So he's done about as well as you could expect under the circumstances. But what we all need to recognise, and you've just identified it, is that the middle of Britain is going to be squeezed. You said £20,000 over 6 years, entirely understandable. And the other thing that we haven't noticed, we've talked a lot about stealth taxes, Alastair. What we've not talked about is stealth cuts happening now. Because when you have, as you know, 10% inflation, but you've said to the government departments, actually, you're not getting any more money, so you just kind of manage your way out of it. So we've had cuts that we don't know about, and probably the departments don't know about at the moment. So there is a grave danger of the further disintegration of some public services. And we've had a sticking plaster for the NHS, which is good.
Yeah. Let me come in there, because to remind folk at home that you're also, you did communications in the city. You know a lot about the city and how those markets work as well. Here's the problem that strikes me. Even if that analysis that you've echoed there is right, we are in a recession right now. The OBR and the IFS say that'll go on for at least another year. What this package is doing is taking huge amounts of demand, whether it's extra taxes that you and I have to pay, or those stealth cuts in public spending that you've just eloquently described, out of the economy. The likelihood is this Conservative Party will face the electorate in the depths of a recession with little to offer. It's like a suicide note, Jonathan.
It's only a suicide note, Alastair, if it's done with the intention of killing yourself off. It is a plea for time. And that is the great enemy of the Conservative Party at the moment, because many of the things which are talked about go a long way down into 2025, 2026. It takes, just for one example, let's take an extreme one. We need Sizewell C for energy purposes, for energy security purposes. It's not going to be producing electricity for 15 years at the very earliest, assuming we can get through ridiculous planning applications and all of that needs to be done. So there's a lot of coming tomorrow. And it's right that it's put there as aspirations. There are great things this country can do. But we need to get away with some of the politics. I'd just like to make one point about science. It's so important that we build on those strengths that we have as a country. But I was distressed to hear Jeremy Hunt saying, and we'll be looking at northern universities. Now, there's nothing against northern universities, but if you're in a problem, you look to your great exemplars. There is an Oxford-Cambridge arc which could be developed, and from their developments, that will also go and level up. But you need to build on strengths, not start from a weak base and trying to build from there. And that was a really disappointing thing about trying to appeal to red wall seats.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that last point. Jonathan, always a pleasure. Keep in touch. Thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Haslam there, former Chief Press Secretary to Sir John Major, and then a giant of communications in the city as well. Little bit optimistic there, but don't miss that point he said, that a lot of it kicks in after the election. Wonder who'll be in charge then. Well, rejoining me now, I'm delighted to say, is Sarah Keel. Sarah's the founder of Baby Cup, and she was on the programme last week ahead of that autumn statement, and she voiced some worries about what might happen. Before I talk to her, let me play you just a little bit of what she said less than a week ago.
It affects so many people, not just in your direct supply chain, but in the wider community of everyone your business touches. It has such great knock-on effect, or rather not so great knock-on effect. It can be disastrous. And if, as the Chancellor keeps saying, everybody is going to be paying more taxes, that means less money in people's pockets, so less spending power. So instead of boosting the economy, it's going to be constricted further.
Exactly the point I just put to Jonathan Haslam, who used to do comms for Sir John Major. Huge amounts of money coming out of the economy means a shrinkage of demand for you and people like you, people who create wealth and opportunity in this country. Was it as bad as you feared, or was it worse?
I think it was worse, sadly worse. Yeah, there was really no glimmer of anything hopeful in there. And I think the doom that this spells for many of us can't be underplayed. Olivia mentioned the chaos. The chaos has been very damaging. But now the reality of what is being introduced, Hunt repeatedly talks about a long-term plan, and in the long run, things will be good. But a long-term plan is no good to those that you destroy in the short term.
In the newspapers, apart from the big political stuff that I mentioned in my introduction, in the business pages, there's an awful lot of big voices, and I think you are one of them, or that's what I'm assuming from what you've just said, who are saying, actually, the truth of the matter is there isn't a growth plan in this budget. Liz Truss may have gone a bit too far, a bit too quickly, but there's no growth plan in this autumn statement. There is an attempt to reduce inflation and bring interest rates down, but no growth.
Yeah, absolutely, I would agree with you entirely there, Alastair, in that summary. And I can't stress enough how worrying this opinion is of the Chancellor's, that we look to the long term. He has to admit that no, the long term, of course, we must always have a game plan, but if we do not look to the immediate, the long term is irrelevant. It really is a very worrying situation.
Was there anything within, we're just, for people who are watching on television, they can see it, but for those listening to our conversation on radio, there's Jeremy Hunt at the dispatch box with those gloomy Tory faces behind him that I described earlier. Was there anything on the positive side for you in terms of running the business? There's a higher minimum wage. I don't know what you pay your people, none of my business at all. But there was a big argument about business rates. There is a reduction in the benefits of the energy price cap that you guys in business had to wait longer than we did to hear about. Was there anything in this package that helped you running Baby Cup?
Sadly, no, there wasn't, Alastair. And I think anything that may seem like a small glimmer of hopefulness is outstripped by the negativity and the damage that was shown in the budget. Even things like the Chancellor not being able to bring himself to admit the fuel increase that is being introduced next year, that itself also has a knock-on effect for businesses, transportation, freight costs. Somewhere along the line, those costs have to be absorbed. And as small businesses, we do our utmost to make sure we don't have to pass that on to the consumer. But ultimately, someone has to pay. No, sadly, it was extremely damaging. It was very worrying.
A sad note to end on, but thank you for your candour and thank you from the whole team for saying yes when they said, would you mind coming back and ruining another weekend talking to me here on GB News? But it was a remarkable contribution for which I'm very, very grateful. And Sarah, you keep in touch and good luck with Baby Cup and all who work there. Thank you very much indeed. Sarah Keel there, the founder of Baby Cup. Delighted to be joined now by Bob Seeley. Bob's the Conservative Member of Parliament for the Isle of Wight. Initially, he was a Penny Mordaunt supporter in the leadership stakes and then ended up backing Rishi Sunak in the final ballot. Two extraordinary contributions, Bob, just before you've been kind enough to join us. Jonathan Haslam, John Major's old spin doctor, not unreasonably saying, look, take it in the hole, it'll bring inflation down, it's stability, the grown-ups are back in charge, it should be OK. pay in the long run. And then Sarah Keel there, who runs a small business, exactly the kind of people that you and your party love and try to help, saying the only stuff that was in that autumn statement hurt her and her business. There's no growth plan. She's really worried about the future.
OK, good afternoon, Alastair. Good afternoon to your viewers and listeners. I mean, look, respect to Sarah, and I wish her business all the well. And it's fascinating to listen to both of them and indeed Olivia. It's not true to say there's no growth plan, because we're boosting growth. We have a 600 billion capital investment fund over 5 years. We're protecting the Levelling Up Fund. We're protecting R&D spending. We will be using Brexit freedoms to reform the financial services sector and providing a 14 billion business rates cut package. So it's not quite true. What I completely agree with, all three of your people you've been chatting with, is that we live in very serious times, and we have an inflation crisis, and we have an energy crisis, and we've also got the elephant in the room, which is that we spent 400 billion during COVID. And unfortunately, these chickens are now coming home to roost. And the first responsibility of a Conservative government is to make sure we balance, well, defence of the nation, but make sure we also balance the books. So what we're trying to do now is balance the books. I completely agree. We need to be talking more about growth. I completely agree. In time, we need to be talking more about hope. And I want Jeremy to focus on those. But I'm very supportive of what he and Rishi have done, because we needed to do it. And that's a reality of the economic situation that we find ourselves in. And fundamentally, that is our key responsibility right here and right now.
I completely understand that and did not interrupt, because it's a perfectly reasonable position. And you're not there to say it, because you're there to speak your own mind, as you always have done for as long as I've known you, there across on the Isle of Wight, just across the water from me in Hampshire. But here's an honest question as well, Bob, that I know you will answer. That's your view. You've thought it through. You've talked with colleagues and what have you. Is it what you're also picking up from constituents in Ryde, in Newport, across the Isle of Wight? Is it what ordinary folk in your constituency also believe, or are you on a tough old slope to persuade them?
Alistair, it's a very good question, because actually I've been out in Bryston canvassing this morning, because we have an election in the West Wight, in Bryston, Shawfleet and Calbourne. And anyone who lives in that patch, please remember to vote on Thursday for lovely Carol Bryant. Right. I came across a couple of long-term Labour voters, and it was always lovely to chat with them, because they're always very friendly down here. But look, when I've been out this morning and in previous weeks on this same by-election, I think people are a bit fed up, but they certainly conservative-minded voters, with a small c, not necessarily party members, understand that we are in a major international bind, that we've come out of COVID, and you've got this war in Ukraine, which has dramatically increased energy costs, which dramatically reduced gas supply into Europe. And we are affected by spot prices in Europe very much, and liquid natural gas prices, which went shooting up. We are affected by the dramatic increase in grain costs, which have put up food inflation. So people understand all these things, but they are also aware that they are not directly blaming the government, or certainly most people that I've spoken to do not say, this is the government's fault, this is the government's responsibility. This morning, a couple of people, especially pensioners, very happy that the triple lock is staying in place, because it is important for people on fixed incomes. So I accept what you say. You know, we have got to make our case. Personally, Alastair, I'm quite happy that we are returning, that we're moving away from this sort of silly psychodrama about Boris that is in the past, and we now have a return to proper politics, and indeed very serious politics. And I think increasingly in the next year or two, people are going to decide, do they want Rishi and the Conservatives to be fixing our significant national and international problems that we face, or do we want to try with Keir Starmer and Labour? And I'm hopeful that people will understand that despite the difficulties that we face, we're better off with Rishi's team and a Conservative government.
I should just point out that other candidates are available in that by-election as well, as Bob would
they certainly are.
As much as anybody else will be. The final very, very quick one as well. But apart from having to sell this package to people when you go out and about canvassing, do you also feel, Bob, that you're going to have to spend some time redefining what it really means to be a Sunak-Hunt Conservative, to win those back who don't understand the need for higher taxes, delayed lower spending and a lack of a convincing growth plan?
Yeah, well, we have a growth plan, but we need to talk more about growth and more about hope. And I'm full of respect and support for the Chancellor and the leader, but I do want us now to be talking more about hope and actually getting things done quickly. If I may, Alastair, I'll give you a quick example. Camp Hill Prison on the Isle of Wight. It's been empty for 8 years. Either the government needs to make a decision to turn it back into a prison, we create 2025 jobs, or better still, somebody needs to make the decision to sell that to the council here on the Isle of Wight so we can use it for investment, we can use it for housing, we can actually do practical things to fight against the recession, to make sure that the recession is as light as possible. So we need to get moving with government decision makings, and we need to do practical things to be focusing on growth. Sorry about the helicopter in the background if you can hear it.
It's the Isle of Wight. You're entitled to it. Bob, it's always a pleasure talking to you, genuinely. Thanks for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon. Keep in touch. Bob Seeley there, the Conservative Member of Parliament for the Isle of Wight. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more coming up on today's programme, including electric cars, also made little appearance in the autumn statement. Owners of these vehicles will now start to pay VED road tax from April 2025, by which time apparently most of us will own them. We'll be discussing that, plus fuel duty with the great motoring correspondent next. But first, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will be cloudy and damp in the east, but drier and brighter for many in the west. Here are the details. Much of northern and eastern Scotland will remain wet and overcast, although the rain will be lighter than Friday. Western areas will be drier with some sunshine. After a bright start to the afternoon in Northern Ireland, cloud will build with some rain spreading into western areas. Temperatures will reach around 9 Celsius. North East England will hang on to the murky weather, but west of the Pennines it should be drier and brighter. Maximum temps will reach 10 Celsius. Much of Wales will have a dry and sunny afternoon. However, high cloud will make the sunshine hazy in the west as the afternoon progresses. In the sunshine, temperatures will reach 11 Celsius. The West Midlands will also have a largely sunny afternoon, but further east skies will be rather cloudy with some light and patchy rain possible. Temperatures reaching double figures for many. Some sunshine may break through the cloud across Norfolk and Suffolk, but much of East Anglia will hang on to the cloud and drizzle for a good part of the afternoon. London and southeastern England will also be rather cloudy, but further west skies will be much brighter, although some showers may reach Devon and Cornwall. Maximum temperatures in the south reaching 11 Celsius. Let's look into the evening, and another band of rain will move into western areas with cloud hanging on in the east. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
.32, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. FIFA's president has defended the decision to host the World Cup in Qatar, trying to show empathy during a news conference.
Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled.
Gianni Infantino's comments follow heavy criticism of Doha's treatment of migrant workers and LGBTQ people. He says he's compassionate towards all groups. On the eve of the event, he also accused the West of hypocrisy, telling European nations they have a lot to answer for.
I'm European. Actually, I am European. Not just I feel European. I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons.
The United Nations is proposing the creation of a new fund to help developing countries cope with the cost of climate change. The money would be used to compensate 134 developing nations for the loss and damage experienced due to droughts, floods and wildfires. The text is yet to be approved by the COP27 summit in Egypt. The search for a woman who was swept into a river has resumed in Aberdeenshire. It's believed she was trying to rescue a dog in the River Don at Moneymusk when she got into difficulty. Heavy rain in the east of Scotland triggered several severe flood warnings, and wet weather is continuing to cause travel disruptions today. The Foreign Secretary is warning that the threat from Iran's nuclear programme is more advanced than ever before. Speaking at a security conference in Bahrain, James Cleverly stressed Britain's determination to stop the strict Islamic country from acquiring a nuclear weapon. He also criticised Iran's rulers for supplying Russia with drones which have been used to launch attacks against civilians in Ukraine. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're watching GB News. Back now to Alastair.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. Now, I did point out to Bob Seeley that other candidates were available in that by-election where he'd been canvassing this morning, which he was entitled to do, but we are obliged, and we do it quite willingly because we do believe passionately in balance, to let you know who the other candidates in that Isle of Wight by-election are. And it's Doug Aldred, who's standing for the Green Party, Carol Bryan, who's the Conservative candidate. Then there's Gary Clark for the Labour Party, Nick Stewart for the Liberal Democrats, and Stephen J. Parks, who is the Vectis Party, which is what the Romans used to call the Isle of Wight. So there we are, and that election takes place on the 24th of November. Balance and impartiality boxes ticked, and quite rightly too. It does matter. Now, back to my agenda, as it were. We've been talking at the beginning of the programme about the autumn statement, and indeed for motorists there were a few really interesting things in there as well. Owners of electric cars will have to start paying road tax, VED, from April 2025, by which time many more of us apparently will own them. And fuel duty was not frozen, as you may recall Edmund King was lobbying for on the programme just a week ago. In fact, hidden away in the Office of Budget Responsibility report was a suggestion that it's likely to rise, and rise by a staggering 23% next year. GB News' ever-sharp Liam Halligan's the one who spotted it, dug it out, only to be met with, some might not kind of nonsense from the Treasury. So, to get to the bottom of it all, I'm delighted to be joined now by top motoring journalist Quentin Wilson. First of all, that fuel duty thing, to be fair to the government, which I have to be, I suppose, in a way, it's been frozen since January 2011, so we've had a reasonably good time. But what got Liam and me was that this measure was kind of hidden away and had to be dug out by Liam. And it's huge.
It is huge. And the OBR rather unhelpfully chucked this hand grenade in, saying that it should go up by 23%. That's the 5p that Sunak gave to the cut, and then by inflation. So 12p a litre will be the rise, which would push it over to, over two quid a litre, which will have a debilitating effect on the economy. However, you know, we are in this mess partly because of our reliance on fossil fuels. So if you keep cutting it, then people won't convert to electric. But then there's this mismatch in policy where they're now disincentivizing people to buy an electric car. I mean, if your electric car is over £40,000, you pay £500 a year. So it's gone from 0 to 500. And most electric cars with long range and decent batteries are over £40,000. So we can see no clear strategy here, Alastair, about air quality, energy independence, getting off fossil fuels. This is just a tax grab on a number of levels. I've been into the Treasury and asked them to reduce the tax on public charging, which is VAT, 20%. It's 5% at home. They're not interested. No. And they say this legislation was written in 1991. Well, that was before electric cars were even a twinkle in Elon Musk's eye. So this is, you know, you talked earlier on in the show about short-termism and long-termism. If we're to get off fossil fuels, if we're to have clean air for this generation, next generation, we must stop thinking electorally and think generationally.
Yes, absolutely. And you talked about the cost, 12p a gallon, staggering £6 billion. But you can bet your bottom dollar, as Robert Halfon has often pointed out before he became a minister when he was chair of the Education Select Committee, that when the government does something to try and bring prices down, they rather take their time. But when prices are going up, it'll be like Starship Enterprise taking off.
Yeah, it will be. And this rock and feather thing, where the prices will just go up and they won't come down. So it's a really, really difficult one. I mean, part of me says, look, we've got to disincentivise people from using fossil fuel cars and vans, but the economy is struggling, and if you hit them with this next year, when we'll still be in recession, probably even worse, then it's going to have this huge, huge effect, and will be another economic own goal.
On your other brilliant point about disincentivising as far as the electric cars are concerned, and COP27 still locked and beating themselves up at the moment in Sharm el-Sheikh, they can't come to any agreement at all. The RAC, I think it was yesterday, said that maybe zero-rated VAD for electric vehicles could be retained at least for the first year. But I guess if we're in a recession, we're going to be still in a recession next year. The demand at those prices that you just quoted, it is not going to be there anyway.
And we've got this thing, 2030, where we need to have everybody buying brand new electric cars and vans. Yeah. They're going to unpick this without a shadow of a doubt, because the Tory right wing doesn't want this. They don't like electric cars. And then when you look at the policy decisions they've been making, they haven't supported Britishvolt, so we have no battery factory. The electric Mini has gone to China. How did that happen? Arrival, the electric van manufacturer in Banbury, they've gone to America. So all that kind of rhetoric about, you know, we're going to clean the air, we're going to have this great green economy, it's gone because they've busted things.
And it's essentially, last point, is to sum it up. We won't do the white van because I'm just being told that we have to stop at that point. But I just want to underline something that you said in all of your years as a top motoring journalist. This is a lack of strategy and long-term thinking rather than a short-term grab.
Yeah, and to make van men pay £800 for the private use of their vans, that's just an insult. They're the backbone of Britain.
Absolutely. Quentin Wilson, it is genuinely always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in. Look forward to talking to you again soon, either down the line or sitting next to me. Either way, a great pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and indeed Friends, with plenty more still to come this afternoon. It's just gone 20 to 1. We'll be including you having your say on the government and the autumn statement in our People's Poll. And I can tell you that the outcome is very interesting. We'll be looking at those results right after this quick break. We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip
of the iceberg. And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 16 minutes to 1, sort of just a little bit less than 1:45. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio, and it is time for our very latest GB News People's Poll. The Chancellor Jeremy Hunt announced that more than 600,000 people on universal credit will have to meet with a work coach to help them get back to work. We asked in our poll if people supported that idea, and 57% of you said, yes, we do. We asked who you blame for the current economic mess in the United Kingdom. 20% said it was Liz Truss, and I presume Kwasi Kwarteng as well, with an equal proportion blaming Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is the Sunak-Hunt line, of course. The threshold at which people pay the highest rate of tax, 45p in the pound that is, has been reduced from 150,000 to 125,000, and 50% of you support that measure. And when asked which of the following would be the best to manage the British economy going forward, 42% said they don't really know. And it was even Stevens on Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Goodwin, Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent. One of the most interesting bits I found reading the data overnight and thinking about it this morning is who's to blame. And Labour, of course, say it's all a result of a crisis made in Downing Street, whereas Sunak and Hunt blame Putin's invasion of Russia and a global recession. Actually, they get a little bit more support in the poll, perhaps, than Labour do.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Alastair. I think if you look at how voters are making sense of this current crisis, when we say who do you blame for the turmoil, the top two answers, Liz Truss and her Conservative government, and then global events, war in Ukraine. The good news for Rishi Sunak is he is in a distant fourth place. Only 6% of the country are blaming him and his government. The bad news for Rishi Sunak is that Conservative brand is, pretty damaged after the events of the last 6 months. So what Sunak and Hunt are going to be going all out to try and do over the next few months is to really try and convince voters that the things they're trying to get their arms around are really rooted in these big global shocks to the economy, not just what the Conservative Party has been doing while it's been in office.
Absolutely fascinating and vital point. And Bob Seeley was saying that as well, the Member of Parliament, you know him as well as I do, MP for the Isle of Wight, about getting that core message across. But at the fringes, the Conservative government can do other bits and bobs to remind people who on my social media are saying they're not even blooming Conservatives anymore. And one of those examples is the announcement that more than 600,000 people on universal credit will now have to sit down and meet with a work coach to persuade them that they really cannot work, or here's how you can get back to work. That's all about brand.
Well, absolutely, because what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, Alastair, and I know you've been talking about it on your show, is we've seen this big expansion of the state. We've seen almost 49% of national income now going on public services. We've seen benefits been increased. And a lot of people are saying, well, I'm working, I'm doing my bit for the national economy. What about the 600,000 people who are economically inactive? How can we encourage those people to come back into the labour market? And the thing that we have been reminded of during COVID, of course, Alastair, is this sense of fair play which runs through British political culture. People are tolerant, they are forgiving, they're compassionate, but they also want everybody to chip in. And this is a unique problem for the UK. I mean, the Germans, the French, the Italians, the Americans are not experiencing this to the same extent as we are. So I think actually Hunt is right, and certainly the polling suggests he's right, to zoom in on this issue and to encourage more people to get back into the labour market.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'd prefer that to allowing the immigration rules to change and bring people in from abroad to fill those jobs. The final point, and this bit actually did surprise me, but maybe that's because I live in the world of journalism rather than as regularly out in the real world as I should do. In terms of people who've done very well making an even bigger contribution at this time of difficulty, Hunt and Sunak got that one right as well on making the 45% top rate of income tax kick in a heck of a lot sooner.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we find half the country support it, only a minority oppose it, and the rest say they don't really know whether they like it or not. Among Conservatives, pretty widespread support. More than half the party's electorate are quite up for that policy change. I do think, though, we need to remember that the reason for hesitancy among a large number of voters, Alastair, is they want to aspire. They want to aspire to make more money, to be more successful, to be productive, to climb up the ladder, all of those things that are so central to any modern liberal democracy. And I think the problem we have now is the taxation rates, the overall tax burden is so high, the highest since the Second World War. I think a lot of people out there are feeling as though they're beginning to perhaps not see the incentives to work hard, to keep trying to climb the ladder. And you hit the nail on the head when you just talked about this tension between an economic model that was dependent upon large-scale migration and wasn't investing in British workers versus the economic model many people thought they were getting after Brexit, which was a greater investment in British workers and lower migration. Now, look at the notes in that OBR report. I know that you read the reports as closely as anybody. It specifically says the next 10 years, we're going to continue basically with the economic model that we've had over the last 10 years. Net migration over 200,000, the British people being encouraged to eat into their savings, to continue to keep consuming. This is not a sustainable economic model for the country. And that's why we're seeing large numbers of Conservatives very disillusioned with the direction of travel.
Absolutely, which is reflected very strongly in the social media conversations we've been having as well. I have to leave it there for the time being. Could talk to you all day, but I can't do because I've got other stuff to get on as well. But for the time being, Matt Goodwin, great to talk to you, and thank you very much for all the work you do on the People's Poll. Matt Goodwin there, Professor of Politics and International Relations at the great University of Kent. Now, our rural spotlight this Saturday takes us up to the top of the hour, and today we're looking at the egg shortage. UK egg shortages and rationings are set to continue beyond Christmas as the industry grapples with rising costs and the increase in the number of cases of avian flu that's brought about a lockdown of that very important industry. And I'm delighted to be joined by a new friend, and that's Andrew Jorrett. Andrew is from the British Egg Industry Council, but he's been involved in this trade, this business, for the best part of 30, 40 years. Great to see you. And I've been labouring under, I think, a slight misapprehension in the sense that up to now, I've assumed it's overwhelmingly caused by avian flu, but it's a bigger set of problems than just the flu.
No, it is. Whilst avian flu is a factor, it's not the biggest factor by any means. If you look at our national flock, it hit a peak of about 44 million birds in September 21, and it was starting to decline from that point. And it was declining because of cost pressure. This is cost that producers are facing in terms of feed, which is the biggest element of cost. Feed represents about 55 to 60% of the cost of free-range eggs, but also labour and energy and all the other things. And the important thing to note is that this was before the start of the war in Ukraine. Then, of course, we had the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. And what that did was put feed costs even higher, shot them up by about 40%. So all of a sudden was a further addition to the crisis of cost. So our national flock now stands at about 39 million birds. So we've lost about 5 million birds. And that's because some producers have just decided it's not worth producing to lose money. We might as well just rest our sheds and wait and see.
Yeah, Andrew, perfect timing. Let me butt in, because people who are watching on telly can see that we just had one of those big sheds, not all closed up and horrible, but they've got bags of space to move around with heat lamps up in the ceiling. And just before that, we saw there it is, and the amount of energy involved in keeping those birds warm and content, let alone when they're actually roosting chicks, is gargantuan. People tend to think, oh, chickens run around out in the field, that's all lovely free range. But if you're doing this to supply eggs in volume at an affordable price, your energy bills are astronomical.
Yeah, well, yes and no, actually. Electricity represents about 5 pence a dozen of the cost of producing eggs. And actually, you don't put heat into a free-range house. There's enough bird heat with the insulation in the house to keep the house at a comfortable temperature. What you do have is ventilation to remove to keep the air fresh and so on. So, electricity is a factor, but of course, electricity isn't just a factor for the poultry house. There's all sorts of energy costs go into producing eggs in terms of transport and everything else.
No, I stand corrected on that, and half of my argument stands, but you shed very important light on the other half. My final question to you is this, and it plays both ways in a sense, that one of the reasons why people like Sainsbury's and other supermarkets are being forced to ration is not only supply problems that you and I have discussed, but also because demand is up. And it's just a brilliant reminder that the egg, bless its heart, is a relatively cheaper and hugely nutritional product. So what's the industry doing to maintain that and to meet that demand?
Well, at the end of the day, what we need is pricing such that producers have confidence to carry on producing free-range eggs. It's as simple as that. You mentioned bird flu, and we've lost about 700,000 layers in the UK to bird flu. So in terms of proportion, it's a lot smaller than the loss just because of the cost pressures. What we need to see is better returns for producers, and then that egg production can come back in stream. But also, the thing that we've seen particularly this week, as soon as you get news of shortages, then, of course, what do people do? They go and stock up. And the biggest inquiry to our online website this week has been how to freeze eggs, which clearly tells you that there's an element of stockpiling behaviour. So if people just got back to just buying the eggs they need now, rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to buy a few extras, actually the situation wouldn't be anything like as bad as it has been.
Well, that's a brilliant point to end on. So direct message there from Andrew Jorrett from the British Egg Industry Council. Ease off the demand unless you really need it. Don't buy to store, because they'll get themselves back on track just as soon as they can. I've really enjoyed the conversation, Andrew Jorrett. I hope you keep in touch. You'll be welcome back on the programme anytime. And the very best of luck to you and everybody else in your very important industry. Good to meet you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Andrew Jorrett there from the British Egg Industry Council. It is now 3.5 minutes to 1. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, with lots more coming up on the programme in our second hour. We'll be continuing our conversation about the autumn statement, what it means for you, for business, and indeed for the standing of the Conservative Party. Plus, former three-weight world champion boxer Duke McKenzie will be joining me to discuss something very important, not only to him and to me, but to all of us. All of that to come. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weekend weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will be cloudy and damp in the east, but drier and brighter for many in the west. Here are the details. Much of northern and eastern Scotland will remain wet and overcast, although the rain will be lighter than Friday. Western areas will be drier with some sunshine. After a bright start to the afternoon in Northern Ireland, cloud will build with some rain spreading into western areas. Temperatures will reach around 9 Celsius. Northeast England will hang on to the murky weather, but west of the Pennines it should be drier and brighter. Maximum temps will reach 10 Celsius. Much of Wales will have a dry and sunny afternoon. However, high cloud will make the sunshine hazy in the west as the afternoon progresses. In the sunshine, temperatures will reach 11 Celsius. The West Midlands will also have a largely sunny afternoon, but further east skies will be rather cloudy with some light and patchy rain possible. Temperatures reaching double figures for many. Some sunshine may break through the cloud across Norfolk and Suffolk, but much of East Anglia will hang on to the cloud and drizzle for a good part of the afternoon. London and southeastern England will also be rather cloudy, but further west skies will be much brighter, although some showers may reach Devon and Cornwall. Maximum temperatures in the south reaching 11 Celsius. Let's look into the evening, and another band of rain will move into western areas with cloud hanging on in the east. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
It is 1 minute past 1. Hello and welcome if you've just joined us here on GB News TV and radio. Hello and welcome back if you've been good enough to be with me since midday. I'm Alastair Stewart and we are into the second hour of our programme, keeping you company on TV and radio. We've plenty more still to come in that second hour, including further reaction to the Chancellor's autumn statement, the impact on you, businesses and indeed the prospects for the Conservative Party. But there's lots else happening this weekend, so let's bring you right up to date with all of the news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alastair. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. FIFA's president has defended the decision to host the World Cup in Qatar and tried to show empathy during a news conference.
Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled.
Gianni Infantino's comments follow heavy criticism of Doha's treatment of migrant workers and LGBTQ people. He says he's compassionate towards all groups. He also accused the West of hypocrisy, telling European nations they have a lot to answer for.
I'm European. Actually, I am European. Not just I feel European. I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons.
Well, human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell told GB News the tournament should never have been given to Qatar, and anyone connected with it risks damaging their reputation.
Well, I think it's really shameful that celebrities are allowing themselves to be bought by the Qatar billions in order to put a positive spin on what is a sexist, homophobic and racist dictatorship. I mean, how can David Beckham, Robbie Williams and all these other big stars who are performing in Qatar, how can they have a clean conscience when they know what this regime is doing to people? I think it's going to cause them huge, huge damage.
Following months of bullying and harassment claims, the latest of which involves Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, there are calls to change the culture in Westminster. Chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, Caroline Noakes, says gay men are most at risk. She spoke exclusively to Gloria De Piero.
Young gay men, I sometimes think that they are the most vulnerable, that we give them a mechanism where they know that they're going to be protected.
Why do you say that young gay men may be the most vulnerable?
Because people don't talk about it. And I think that there is still a taboo around homosexuality. And there have been some cases where I can think of individuals who've harassed both male and female members of staff. And the female member of staff has had all of the sympathy, all of the column inches in the press. And there'll be this, and also when it comes to...
And you can watch the full interview on GB News' latest show, Gloria Meets, where you'll find out who the person behind the politician is. That's every Sunday at 6 p.m. Now, the United Nations is proposing the creation of a new fund to help developing countries cope with the cost of climate change. The money would be used to compensate 134 developing nations for the loss and damage experienced due to droughts, floods and wildfires. The text is yet to be approved by the COP27 summit in Egypt, which had to be extended after delegates failed to reach an agreement. The search for a woman who was swept into a river has resumed in Aberdeenshire. It's believed she was trying to rescue a dog in the River Don at Monymusk when she got into difficulty. Heavy rain in the east of Scotland triggered several severe flood warnings, with the wet weather continuing to cause travel disruptions today. The Foreign Secretary is warning that the threat from Iran's nuclear program is more advanced than ever before. Speaking at a security conference in Bahrain, James Cleverly stressed Britain's determination to stop the strict Islamic country from acquiring a nuclear weapon. He also criticised Iran's rulers for supplying Russia with drones, which have then been used to launch attacks against civilians in Ukraine.
As their people demonstrate against decades of oppression, Iran's rulers are spreading bloodshed and destruction across the region and as far away as Kyiv. Britain is determined to work alongside our friends to counter the Iranian threat, interdict the smuggling of conventional arms, and prevent the regime from acquiring nuclear weapons capability.
North Korea says it's accelerating the creation of nuclear weapons to counter threats from Washington. This state media showed video of the new intercontinental ballistic missile being test-fired after the country's leader warned of a fiercer military response. Kim Jong-un was also seen in public with his daughter for the first time, raising speculation that she could be training for a leadership role. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. Let's continue our conversation about the autumn statement, economically and politically. Jeremy Hunt renewed the UK government's stance on climate change, saying, and I quote, "We remain fully committed to the historic Glasgow Climate Pact agreed at COP26, including a 68% reduction in our emissions by 2030, adding that, and I quote again, "cheap, low-carbon, reliable energy must sit at the heart of any modern economy." He also temporarily increased the energy profit level from 25 to 35% and confirmed Sizewell C nuclear power station. But some feel that he could have gone even further, particularly on renewables. And we'll be talking about that in just a moment. But first, you've been in touch on that big topic, so let me bring you into the conversation as well, starting with Keith, who says, after the budget, all I can say is bring back Truss. John says the budget is for the city and not the people. I hate this budget. The Truss budget was a people's budget and more likely to win elections. If the Tories continue with this budget, then I will not vote for them again. I think they will be in for a shock at the next election. Kyle says we now need to see an effort for real and genuine reform of the economy and public services that can help reduce the tax burden in the future and focus spending more on the front line. Fascinating stuff, and we will try and get more in if we can. It's 8 minutes past 1, so we've got a best part of an hour left, so keep those views coming in. And also do subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can see previous programmes and indeed previous interviews. We are at GB News. Now, just before I read out the emails, I was talking about the alternative energy sector and those who said maybe that the Chancellor of the Exchequer could have done more. That list of people includes my next guest, and that's Stuart Murphy. Stuart's the founder of the tidal power group, TPGen 24. Good to see you, sir. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this Saturday afternoon. Mr. Hunt talked about offshore wind and carbon capture. Is he not pro-tidal, or is he yet to be convinced of its merits?
None of the leading people in the government, especially in BEIS, are committed to tidal range at the moment, and tidal range is one of the 3 marine energy sectors that can really alter the energy mix in this country. The problem we have with nuclear, of course, which we'll need for a long time in the transitional period, is that it's only low carbon at best, and it'll take 10 or 20 years to come online. Wind is not base load, so we have a problem there with energy. And of course, one of the main reasons why they are saying we may have outages this winter is because we've closed down, as part of our climate policy, about 10 to 12 gigawatt of coal and replaced it with renewable energy like wind and solar. And of course, solar is not much used this time of year. And as far as carbon capture is concerned, you know, the policy must be of most people is that we shouldn't be using carbon in the first place. And tidal energy is a baseload power. We can use it 24 hours a day. We've devised a way of making it produce power 24 hours a day. We're an offshore island. We're about a kilometre near shore. And the other problem with all the other renewables that people are promising, in particular the Labour Party, about zero fossil by 2030, is the grid connection through National Grid. It's almost impossible to get connections until early 2030s. And that's something the government seriously needs to look at, because we have got some superb systems that can produce electricity, but not at the scale that we need at the time we need. And we need this urgently, not tomorrow.
I accept all of that, but here's the point you didn't mention, which I can remember, whether it's looking at the Severn barrage or the Cardiff Bay schemes. What ministers in the past, be they Tory or Labour, have always said is, but your schemes cost a heck of a lot to get going. Is that still the case?
Not at all, no. If you look at Hinkley C at 30 billion and rising, we'll be less than 10 billion and produce about half the same amount of power they will produce. So for 3 of ours, we'll produce twice as much electricity without all the issues that we have with low carbon, storing the fuel afterwards.
So you would argue, language I don't understand necessarily, but folk out there will have heard it time and time again, on the kind of price per megawatt hour. You are saying right here, live on GB News, that you're as competitive as the next guy.
We will be competitive. We might not be competitive in the early days, but we certainly will be competitive. But we have one thing above wind and solar. We are baseload power. We can use this 24/7. You can't use that. And as I said before, we may have outages this winter because we've got rid of coal as part of our policy, which is probably right, but we've replaced it with renewable energy. And we only got words from the government and very little practical action. The point we're getting to now, Alastair, is the cost of investment can't be a consideration because the cost of doing nothing is infinitely greater. And that's the issue that we have. You go to the Arab, Middle East, and fuel was less than 20 pence a litre because it's out their backyard. We've got tidal range in the United Kingdom from the northwest of England to the Severn Estuary. It's in our backyard, but we're doing absolutely nothing about taking that energy into our ownership and reducing costs on the consumer at the end of the day. Homegrown electricity is the name of the game.
I buy that as well, but on the economics of it, most people, me included, listening to our conversation, we don't care where the electricity comes from, and apart from maybe the climate change carbon dimension. We just want reliable energy, and you've made the point about constant baseload, because tides come and go, they always have done forever and a day. But the cost of setting it up, there's one bit you didn't include in the analysis, and a lot of business friends of mine who are involved down in Hampshire, particularly in the solar panel sector, say that the levy on the profits of the oil giants and the other energy sector, and there's a new one in on generators now, could be putting people off investing. So are you backed exclusively by private equity, by wealthy chums from your own resources? Where does the capital come to get your scheme off the ground?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Because we haven't got a tidal range sector at this moment in time, it'd be impossible for us to say where all the money will come from. It's a stage-by-stage model that we need to have government open the tidal range door and look at this as a serious part of the economic energy mix, homegrown mix of energy. It will be more expensive than wind and solar. We agree initially in the few years that it starts producing power. But when the wind's blowing and the sun is shining, we don't need to supply the grid. We can switch our power into making green hydrogen. There's no spare capacity in the world to make green hydrogen. And electric cars are the present. Hydrogen is the future.
Fascinating stuff. Great to talk to you, Stuart Murphy, founder of TPGen24. Thank you very, very much indeed. A man to watch and a business, TPGen24, to watch as this very important debate continues. And we will keep an eye on what he's doing. And a very honest admission there. We haven't got the capital in place yet, but we are competitive. And he says the offer is compelling. We shall watch that with great interest. Now, autumn statement. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by my next guest. Known him for ages and respect him a great deal. Dr. Gerard Lyons is the Chief Economic Strategist at Net Wealth, former advisor to Boris Johnson and very close confidant of Liz Truss, and I guess in that sense to Kwasi Kwarteng and that budget which has taken so much blame. Gerard, forget timing and presentation of that picture just for a moment, because that's a lot of old hot air, but that's what people are saying now. Is the actual idea of go for growth, that dream that you and Liz and other people had, is that now completely dead?
Well, I think that's the key underlying issue that still needs to be addressed in the UK. So in that respect, it's not dead. Since the 2008 global financial crisis, Western Europe, including the UK, have slipped into a low-growth environment. Unless we actually address that and get out of it, then the problems we now see will continue to dominate. So we do need at some stage to have a focus on where will growth come from and what policies need to be in place to ensure it.
An earlier guest, and I don't expect you will have been able to listen to it because I know you were waiting to get ready to talk to us at this stage, but I was talking to Bob Seeley, Tory Member of Parliament for the Isle of Wight, who said that we've got to get out the drum beating more on growth and underline that some of the bits that are in there, like reductions in business rates and so on and so forth. But my social media is full of people who simply say what Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak have done in increasing taxation, in saying that we'll reduce public spending, but at some time in the future, has simply ceased to be conservative. As I said in the introduction, you used to work with Boris Johnson, you've worked very closely with Liz Truss. Do you recognise that autumn statement as being a Tory package?
Look, let's put it in perspective. The economy has been hit by a combination of factors in recent years. The COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine have made the country poorer. On top of that, the Bank of England has failed to get on top of inflation, which has compounded the outlook. So against that backdrop, the Chancellor last Thursday had to face a number of constraints. And the way out of it is to think he can do this. He can try and grow the economy. He can borrow. But if he doesn't grow the economy, and if he doesn't want to borrow anymore, then he goes for austerity, i.e. squeezing spending, or tax increases. Now, last Thursday, the Chancellor Hunt, felt that the so-called black hole or the fiscal gap was there because growth was going to be weak. He didn't want to borrow any more because he thought the financial markets wouldn't trust him. The reality is financial markets have calmed down and he could have borrowed more. And then against that backdrop, he's gone for, as you might say, an unconservative approach. The good news is he's avoided austerity the next 2 years, but he's gone for tax increases.
But
the real problem is beyond,
Gerard, let me say,
not the next 2 years, it's beyond that.
Sure. My cheeky question was to know, and you've just quoted me saying what I call an unconservative package is whether you thought that as well. And let me merely add to that analysis that you just gave so brilliantly. Even modest growth, and it is incredibly modest, is 3 years out via 2 years of recession and much, much higher taxes via falling living standards that even the Resolution Foundation find dreadful.
Yeah, coming back to earlier how you introduced me, I did speak to Truss or Kwarteng after they went into Downing Street. So I wasn't involved in any way, shape or form in the mini budget. But one thing they failed to do then was to actually take account of financial markets. And basically markets were then in a very febrile state. What we've now seen is we've almost gone to the other extreme, that the Chancellor last Thursday felt that he actually needed to be, let's say, overcompensate and actually really constrain the economy. The way I would paraphrase it or say it, we're in a hole, but the Chancellor's decided to dig deeper. He's decided to dig deeper through tax increases and through squeezing spending in the future. And you need to turn that on its head. And that means at some stage reforming the public sector, getting spending under control, recognising there's a limit to which taxes can go up. But the point is that in the next 2 years, the UK is the only G7 country that's tightening fiscal policy going into a global recession. That's not a sensible approach. On the good side, Chancellor Hunt has avoided austerity because he's not squeezing spending. But on the negative side, he is still hitting many people through the tax increases. So that's a problem. Hopefully, this will limit the extent to which interest rates go up. But that in itself will probably mean that inflationary pressures will persist a bit longer. So really coming back to your original question, the UK needs to ask itself, how can it get itself out of this hole? And in some respects, the government needs to be accepting that it should be borrowing for investment. On Thursday, if there was a good part, the Chancellor decided not to cut government capital spending for the next 2 years. But the bad side on Thursday, there was little in there for the private sector, small firms, big companies to want to keep investing. And that's what we really need to be focused on, not just in the next 2 years, but beyond that as well.
100% agree with every word of that. And again, we had Sarah Keane on earlier on. She runs a lovely, brilliant, classically British small business. Baby cups is what she makes here in the UK. And she just echoed exactly that. And she was deeply worried. And she's no great economist like you, but she said it's about demand. If people don't have money, they ain't going to buy my baby cups. And it is as simple as that. Final point for you, and I think it does draw together those strands that you and I were just discussing. Do you think deep down that the Hunt-Sunak gamble is that actually inflation will come down sooner, perhaps halfway through next year, and that will bring down interest rates, and that's the golden goose that they hope to achieve before they have to face the electorate?
Well, that's probably their hope. The reality is that interest rates can't really come down. The question is, hopefully they won't peak at too high a level. Inflationary pressures will ease. The Bank of England has not really come under enough scrutiny here. Basically, the Bank of England has allowed the inflation genie out of the bottle. But inflationary pressures will ease over the next year or so. But the reality is that you still need to see some demand in the economy. You need to see demand from consumers. They're being squeezed as real incomes are squeezed. You're seeing companies hit by corporation tax going up. So the hope for the government is that, as you say, inflation peaks lower, interest rates don't go as high, and the external environment improves. But what could be done is the government could try and do a bit more to actually minimise the pain. But we're now down that route where tax increases will hurt, and that will be the case over the next 18 months or so.
Gerard Lyons, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon, and you keep in touch with us. Thank you very much indeed. Gerard Lyons, Chief Economist at Net Wealth, and always a pleasure to talk to him. And I'm equally delighted to now welcome onto the programme again the Labour Member of Parliament for Bootle, and that's Peter Dowd, who between 2017 and 2020 served as the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. That's basically the number 2 in the pecking order after the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Great to see you. A blunt, slightly cheeky question. Could you believe what you heard from Jeremy Hunt on Thursday?
No, I don't generally believe anything the Conservative front bench says, but
you know what I mean politically, what you were hearing.
Well, I won't be too partisan in that regard. I think we just have to look at the facts and the figures and keep too much of the finger pointing and emotion out of it. I don't think people want finger pointing and emotion. They want sort of an analysis of where we're at and the direction of travel that we should actually go into, and learn from that 12 years of the Conservatives being in government. That's what I want to do. That's what I think we should all be doing, basically.
Do you know, also, I wonder if you feel the pressure on now as a team to be a little clearer. I know Rachel Reeves always says, and it's not unreasonable, until an election is called, we're not going to spell out precise detail of what your party would do were it to be in government. But Sir Keir and Rachel were both on telly last night, and I heard them say that they both accept that there is currently a £50 billion hole in the public finances that needs to be sorting out. Is there a Labour Party answer to that doesn't involve higher taxes and lower public spending?
I mean, I think the thing for me, I talked before, Alastair, about trying to learn lessons. So if you've got a situation where you've had low growth for the past 12 years, you've had low investment, low productivity, you've had way below the French, the Germans and even the Italians, you've got a tax relief system of £450 billion, which isn't working properly. You've got money support taken away from research and development at the same time as the Secretary of the Chancellor is saying we need to invest in that particular area, with not a great deal to show of that 12 years. My point is that, well, what you would do is, well, not quite reverse of that, but you get to the stage where you would be moving towards sustainable growth. You would be talking towards more investment in the public and the private sector, trying to enhance our productivity, attempting to get sort of growth up. And you know, this £450 billion worth of tax relief that we have, that's tax reliefs on your pension, my pension, on our basic, our sort of 12,500 allowance. They're all those tax reliefs. Let's have a look at them. The government have done that by stealth in terms of not increasing the 12,500. So in a sense, a full look at those £450 billion worth of tax reliefs and see if that can bring any in. So, for example, the non-domicile status where you live here, but for all intents and purposes, you don't pay the same level of tax. So there's a huge amount that can be done there to sort of move into some more progress in relation to the public finances.
Absolutely. And I heard very clearly Rachel say on the day that non-dom thing was something that wasn't on the radar, that you wanted to put on the radar. My final question to you is that we still live in a parliamentary democracy, and hurrah for that. Will there be parts of this that go through the House of Commons that you will actively vote against? And do you anticipate Tory rebellions, Tory backbenchers, perhaps either abstaining or even joining you in the no lobbies?
Well, you have to see what the proposals are, what the actual resolution is, because sometimes they come in sections and sometimes they come as a sort of a job lot. Let's just see what happens after the debate. We've got the debate on Monday and Tuesday. Let's see what happens at that time so we can tease out what we need to do. Whether Tories rebel or not, I just think that might be sort of the internal party politics of the Conservative Party, which, again, I really am not that interested in that. What I'm interested in is trying to get the country back onto a sustainable growth level and sort of trying to get rid of the economic regional inequalities that affect my region, for example. So that's what I want to do in a very proactive, positive sense.
Peter, great to talk to you, and thank you for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon. Peter Dowd there, former number 2 at the Treasury, shadow number 2 at the Treasury, and Member of Parliament for Bootle. More to come. The time is 27 minutes past 1, so we've got just over half an hour left. And let's first of all bring you up to date with the all-important weekend weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will be cloudy and damp in the east, but drier and brighter for many in the west. Here are the details. Much of northern and eastern Scotland will remain wet and overcast, although the rain will be lighter than Friday. Western areas will be drier with some sunshine. After a bright start to the afternoon in Northern Ireland, cloud will build with some rain spreading into western areas. Temperatures will reach around 9 Celsius. North East England will hang on to the murky weather, but west of the Pennines it should be drier and brighter. Maximum temps will reach 10 Celsius. Much of Wales will have a dry and sunny afternoon. However, high cloud will make the sunshine hazy in the west as the afternoon progresses. In the sunshine, temperatures will reach 11 Celsius. The West Midlands will also have a largely sunny afternoon, but further east skies will be rather cloudy with some light and patchy rain possible. Temperatures reaching double figures for many. Some sunshine may break through the cloud across Norfolk and Suffolk, but much of East Anglia will hang on to the cloud and drizzle for a good part of the afternoon. London and southeastern England will also be rather cloudy, but further west skies will be much brighter, although some showers may reach Devon and Cornwall. Maximum temperatures in the south reaching 11 Celsius. Let's look into the evening, and another band of rain will move into western areas with cloud hanging on in the east. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Almost exactly 1:30. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. FIFA's president has defended the decision to host the World Cup in Qatar. trying to show empathy during a news conference.
Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled.
Gianni Infantino's comments follow heavy criticism of Doha's treatment of migrant workers and LGBTQ people. He says he's compassionate towards all groups. On the eve of the event, he also accused the West of hypocrisy, telling European nations they have a lot to answer for.
I'm European. Actually, I am European. Not just I feel European. I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons.
The United Nations is proposing the creation of a new fund to help developing countries cope with the cost of climate change. The money would be used to compensate 134 developing nations for the loss and damage experienced due to droughts, floods and wildfires. The text is yet to be approved by the COP27 summit in Egypt. The search for a woman who was swept into a river has resumed in Aberdeenshire. It's believed that she was trying to rescue a dog at Moneymusk when she got into difficulty. Heavy rain in the east of Scotland triggered several severe flood warnings, and wet weather is continuing to cause travel disruptions today. The Foreign Secretary is warning that the threat from Iran's nuclear program is more advanced than ever before. Speaking at a security conference in Bahrain, James Cleverly stressed Britain's determination to stop the strict Islamic country from acquiring a nuclear weapon. He also criticised Iran's rulers for supplying Russia with drones, which have been used to launch attacks against civilians in Ukraine. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're watching GB News. Time now for Alastair.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. So the World Cup kicks off tomorrow in Qatar, as you heard in Ray's bulletin, and may just have heard elsewhere. FIFA's decision to allow the Gulf state to host the event, despite that truly extraordinary press conference with the boss of FIFA, has faced worldwide backlash due to the country's poor human rights record. The Peter Tatchell Foundation's protesting outside the Qatari embassy in London about the country's lack of LGBTQ+ rights ahead of the first match. And I'm delighted to say that GB News reporter Olivia Utley, who was with me at the top of the programme, has now hot-footed it down there, and there she is outside the embassy in London. Over to you, Olivia.
Hello, yes, I'm here outside the Qatari embassy where Peter Tatchell and a band of protesters are here. They're protesting against the lack of not just LGBTQ+ rights in Qatar, but human rights in general. And Peter Tatchell was arrested in Qatar last month for a one-man protest outside the embassy. He was finally released, but only, he says, because of the intervention from the British embassy and because he is a Westerner. And he thinks that were he Qatari, he would have been doing time right now. So these protesters are not only protesting the human rights regime in Qatar, they're also protesting FIFA and the decision of FIFA to hold the World Cup in Qatar. They're not happy. Peter is speaking, he's stopped speaking now, but he's been speaking about that decision from FIFA. He's been condemning the FIFA president, who's been speaking today. He was apparently trying to express empathy, but that's not how it came across. So people are not happy with Qatar's human rights record, and they're speaking loud and clear.
Olivia Utley there, GB News political correspondent outside the Qatari embassy with that protest going on. We asked last night and indeed this morning for your thoughts on our discussion about the autumn statement, and you have been flooding us, for which we are very grateful. Let's start off with Anthony, who says, Truss was right. Unfortunately, MPs with no backbone destroyed it. Now they're still complaining about what's replaced it. Mike says, after 50 years of supporting the Tories, I will not vote for them next time. They've made a complete mess of our energy, health, migration and cost of living. They have lied, he says, spent too much time in fighting and just do not listen to the public's opinion. Ouch. Alan says the Tories have no plan for energy security. They have no plan for growth. They have no plan for small business. It seems to me that they are intent on destroying the country to drag us back into the European Union. They have no vision for me at all, so I won't be voting for them again. Quite intriguing, the volume of reaction that we've had to this conversation and the point about the lack of a plan for growth. Bob Seeley, the Tory Member of Parliament for the Isle of Wight, saying, yeah, we've got to be clear about that. There are some things within the autumn statement, Bob said, but perhaps we're not arguing for it loudly or long enough. And the number of people who are saying that they don't see it as being a Conservative measure and that it will drive them away from the party come the general election, I found also interesting. And my final observation on that is the number of you who've said, don't forget Conservative leadership. There are now alternatives to the Conservative Party who think the way that they think. Ooh. Do keep in touch. We love to hear from you and we love to share your thoughts. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're at GB News for all of our previous interviews and indeed for our previous programmes. Now, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, nothing to do with the autumn statement, this, I'm glad to say, but he has visited Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, for the first time. That is breaking news. I'm not sure that we have any pictures yet, but if we get them before the end of the programme, we will certainly bring them to you, or Ray will in his next bulletin. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with plenty more still to come in the final 20 minutes of the programme. Including, we will have the latest from Ukraine that may or may not feature Rishi Sunak. It follows the recent Russian missile and drone strikes, crippling their energy systems. But more importantly, what I'll be asking is how Ukraine conducts itself as it moves perhaps towards victory after the triumphs in Kherson. But first, we're going to take a quick break.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. 2021, you're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Now, this week, police forces across the United Kingdom have been carrying out Operation Scepter It is a targeted national initiative to reduce knife crime by both engaging with local communities as well as cracking down on criminals who carry those knives. The police are aiming to make the UK simply a safer place to live. Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has our report.
A national crisis. In the last decade, knife crime in England and Wales has increased by 48%. And as the number of knives continues to increase, education is more important than ever.
Carrying a knife is one thing, but associating with it can now get you in serious trouble.
In 2014, Byron Heighton's brother, John Joe, was murdered in Preston. Since then, he began the JJ Effect, an organisation dedicated to educating people about the weapon used to kill his brother.
We now have kids as young as sometimes 13, 14, if not younger, admitting suicide, handing knives in, just because the schools trust me to give them what might be a crazy presentation never seen before, but the results also marry up to that. We're travelling up and down the country. We've taken nearly 600 knives off kids from as young as 6, all the way up to grown men and adults and women. You name it, we do it, and all that in the memory of my brother.
Up and down the UK, families like Byron's have been torn apart by knife crime. This week, police forces around the country have carried out Operation Sceptre, an initiative focused on tackling this issue.
In Lancashire, we make a really big effort for this week. We put a lot of resources into it to try and help the public and make sure that the communities are as safe as they can possibly be regarding this knife crime issue.
Operation Sceptre takes knives off the streets, but it's also about changing people's perceptions. As part of that, Chief Inspector Oldfield has a message for anyone who feels they have the right to carry a knife.
I would ask them, first of all, don't take the knife with them. You must dispose of the knife, and you must speak to somebody about the issues around why you're actually carrying the knife. You may believe you need to carry that knife for protection, but that is not the case. What we want you to do is put that knife down and speak to somebody to get support.
Because ultimately, knives don't kill, people do. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Food for thought there, but a very simple bottom line message. More complex is Ukraine. As I said just before we went into that, we've just had confirmation that the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is now in Kyiv to meet with President Zelensky to, and I quote the briefing from number 10 Downing Street, to confirm continued UK support. That according to a number 10 Downing Street spokesman. President Zelensky's forces, meantime, have scored a major victory in Kherson. The Russians are retaliating with more missile strikes and, of course, winter beckons. But there's also another challenge for the Ukrainians. How do they conduct themselves in victory, as in Kherson? There are reports of collaborators being rounded up, pictures of them even being tied to lampposts, and suggestions overnight and this morning that Russian prisoners of war are being shot. It was Winston Churchill who said of war, in defeat, defiance, but in victory, magnanimity. I'm delighted to be joined now by a good friend of this programme, Andrei Osadchuk, who is a Ukrainian Member of Parliament for the Golosh Party. Great to see you, and it's a tough question. I mean, normally when we have our conversations, you bring us up to date with how it's going. We know how it's going. It's going well for you. But how do you remain focused on handling that success and not damaging your standing internationally?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here again. The simple answer on your question is just the words which was said, I think, in 1943 or 1944, by one well-known gentleman who was served as a Prime Minister of United Kingdom. I may describe our aim just in one word: victory. Victory at any cost. That's exactly what unites Ukraine. And that's what we hope unite Ukraine with our key strong allies, especially the United Kingdom. By the way, just from your program, I learned that Prime Minister of United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak, is in Kyiv today. It's extremely good news, simply because UK leadership keep promise. Everything what has been started by Boris Johnson in late March this year. And I would like to remind everyone who is watching this program that UK Prime Minister was the first leader of the West who started speaking with Ukrainian vocabulary, if you want, calling things as they are. And in fact, UK took the leadership in the West against Russian aggression in Ukraine. And that UK leadership is now continuing despite the change of the actors who are taking the chairs of prime ministers of United Kingdom, simply saying that democracy is what we defend here in Ukraine, and the fundamental rules and principles of the world which we all fight for is the same for Ukrainian and British.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely happy to see UK Prime Minister just talking to Zelensky as I see in the program right now.
Well, I'm equally delighted with the timing of it because you and I are chatting here on TV and radio. For our friends who are kind enough to listen to our conversation on radio, what Andrei just saw and what I'm seeing is, on the left of your picture, Prime Minister Sunak, and on the right of your picture, there he is, President Zelensky of Ukraine. So there we have got the pictures for it, and that is superb. Thank you, Andrei, also for those kind words about the UK. It really does matter to most good-thinking and thoughtful people here in the UK. But they, funnily enough, will be the first to understand, given what your people have had to endure, whether it was in the bombardment of Kyiv itself, or whether it was in the indiscriminate rocket attacks or the attacks on the steelworks. There has been brutality that your people have had to endure in this invasion. Their temptation will be to be brutal in return, to retaliate wherever they can. That puts a huge burden of responsibility on the shoulders of Zelensky, who we just saw on those pictures with Sunak, but also on your military commanders out in the field.
Look, first of all, yes, we are passing very challenging times. Yes, everything what is happening daily is extremely challenging and extremely difficult. But believe me or not, we adapted to this reality, mostly because we are extremely motivated. And yes, there is still a huge unity inside of Ukraine. And simply we know that we are right because we are fighting not just for our land, we're fighting for our future.
Yes.
So from another hand, everything what is happening in Ukrainian energy now is very, very much expected. So there is no news, neither for me, for anybody else, that Russians will start, to destroy all energy infrastructure. That's exactly what they're doing now, because we see that they're fighting against everyone who is physically in Ukraine, because absence of electricity and heating before the winter, it's definitely an attempt to destroy everything. But again, we are prepared, we are motivated. There is no big unexpected, I would say, thing for us. Said that, definitely we will face the most difficult winter in Ukraine. And I want people in UK to understand that we respect the difficulties with the living crisis in the United Kingdom. But as I'm repeating, the living crisis is now in Ukraine. Now we have a blackouts for 6-7 hours. And in Ukraine now, it's not the issue of the cost of the energy. It's the issue of the presence of the energy. Because believe me, it's not really good to live in the 3 million people city like Kyiv when the streets are absolutely out of the light. But again, I'm sure that we will pass this winter.
Yeah.
Coming back to your question about the challenges for Ukrainian military, yes, we know that we fight with a huge evil. Yes, we need to react and respond to them using all possible tools. Yes, different things may happen, but I'm just speaking to you, just being in Hague, and we agreed with our allies that we will prosecute war crimes in all dimensions.
Andrei, we have to leave it there. on a very important note about prosecuting war crimes wherever. It's always a pleasure, genuinely, to talk to you. Thank you for finding time for us. Now, off you go and watch television and see what your President and our Prime Minister are saying to one another. Andrei Osadchuk, thank you very much indeed. And sorry, during the conversation, something from number 10 Downing Street popped up there for a moment. That was because we were just literally taking in the feed of Rishi Sunak there in Kyiv for the first time, talking to Zelensky. You'll get more of that in our news bulletins as they progress during the day here on GB News TV and radio. Just coming up to 8 minutes to 2 and the top of our programme, and we finish with this very, very important issue. November is a month which is strongly associated with men's issues. Many men, of course, sport the moustache in support of Movember. But today, the 19th of November, marks International Men's Day, a day that's aiming to promote positive conversations surrounding men's issues, particularly men's mental health. And according to the Mental Health Foundation, 1 in 8 men suffers from mental health challenges such as depression or anxiety, and that men between 40 and 49 have the highest suicide rates in the United Kingdom. Delighted to be joined now by Mind Ambassador and former 3-weight world champion boxer Duke McKenzie to discuss this issue. Great to see you, Duke, and Dog as well. How brilliant, perfect combination. It's that suicide statistic that is so terrifying and so standing out, because other people just say, oh, not another international day of this, that and the other. Young people and people in their 40s taking their own lives.
Yeah, it's epidemic proportions. I'm sure you're aware of these statistics. It's something which needs to be addressed, obviously, immediately. There are so many young men, particularly, I think, between the ages of 18 and 45 years of age, which cannot find a way out of nowhere, and generally will just do something crazy and just check out. Quite recently, the most alarming thing for me, I think, I heard an interview recently with Tyson Fury, the heavyweight champion of the world, stating the fact that boxing had saved his life and had really saved him from doing something really stupid. So, yeah, it's something that needs to be spoken about. It's something that needs to be done about it with immediate effect.
My kids are big fans of Tyson Fury, and one thing that strikes me as being standout is that young folk particularly look at people like you and Tyson and other sports people, I mean, even if it's things like fighting, as kind of heroes. And for you to speak out about vulnerability, about the fact that people do worry, do suffer from mental illness, is incredibly important, particularly for young folk.
Well, you know, I mean, ultimately, boxers, we're normal people at the end of the day. Obviously, we found somewhere where we can hang our hat and have gone to become very successful. But along with that success comes tremendous pressure. And if you can't cope with the pressure, I'm not saying everybody wants to do something crazy or, you know, check out, but it puts a lot of pressure on you just as a general rule. And it's hard to find a way out of nowhere. I know several boxers, as we speak right now, who are struggling with their mental health. I'm also an ambassador for the Ringside Charitable Trust, and they are doing amazing jobs now to help retired boxers specifically who are struggling with their mental health, you know, pointing them in the right direction, because not everybody knows that there's help out there. And men, on a general rule, don't speak about their mental health. They don't speak about things that are going wrong in their private life, personal life, and that's, you build up a lot of anger. You build up a lot of depression can set in very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
Lights go away and the titles are gone and the money's gone. Yeah. Then what else is there? That's what a lot of boxers think. But there's always help out there. Always.
I tell you what, Duke, as well, though, when you say there about when the money's gone and the career is up, it's affecting so many people out there generally. I've just finished with this one final quick one, and that is, as with so many of these pressures, the key to progress is simply conversation. It's good to talk, as that advert famously used to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is good to talk. Everybody has things going on in their lives which ultimately nobody else knows about, and you know, when it all comes out, generally it's hard to cope with that sort of thing. But you know, it's a good starting point. It's a good starting point. It's a good place to be, because once you start to relieve that pressure, this little one here, he knows all about whatever's going on in my life. This one, he's a lifesaver, this one. This is Jasper, by the way. And I'm not saying everybody should go out and get a dog, but I'm just saying, dogs are a great form of communication. They're a great form of exercise. I have to take him out. I've got another dog also, my beagle. So, we're out all the time. And, you get some fresh air in your lungs and you can come back almost a different person.
Not a word or syllable I disagree with there. Duke, great to talk to you, and lots of love to Jason and to the Beagle. And thanks for the work that you do for Mind. There we are, that's it. That's all that we have time for today. But I will be back with my team discussing skills, education and public spending tomorrow. And I'm delighted to say I'll be joined by a very good friend of mine, Baroness Nikki Morgan, former Education Secretary, to take us through all of that and also to hear your comments. So don't forget to get in touch. But for me, for now, a very good afternoon to you and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will be cloudy and damp in the east, but drier and brighter for many in the west. Here are the details. Much of northern and eastern Scotland will remain wet and overcast, although the rain will be lighter than Friday. Western areas will be drier with some sunshine. After a bright start to the afternoon in Northern Ireland, cloud will build with some rain spreading into western areas. Temperatures will reach around 9 Celsius. North East England will hang on to the murky weather, but west of the Pennines it should be drier and brighter. Maximum temps will reach 10 Celsius. Much of Wales will have a dry and sunny afternoon. However, high cloud will make the sunshine hazy in the west as the afternoon progresses. In the sunshine, temperatures will reach 11 Celsius. The West Midlands will also have a largely sunny afternoon, but further east skies will be rather cloudy with some light and patchy rain possible. Temperatures reaching double figures for many. Some sunshine may break through the cloud across Norfolk and Suffolk, but much of East Anglia will hang on to the cloud and drizzle for a good part of the afternoon. London and southeastern England will also be rather cloudy, but further west skies will be much brighter, although some showers may reach Devon and Cornwall. Maximum temperatures in the south reaching 11 Celsius. Let's look into the evening, and another band of rain will move into western areas with cloud hanging on in the east. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV,